Hello patron and welcome back to my life. It's Writer Wednesday where I talk about the art and business of writing and tell you how I do what I do as an indie author. Today Felix talked about how I get the covers done for my books, specifically the process that I go through with my cover artists. Felix thought I should talk about this because I recently hired them to do a sketch for one of my covers, more about that in a moment, and they said that the process was a lot easier than it normally is for authors or anyone who commissions an artist, really. So this video is mostly about the process, not where to find a good cover for cheap or how to get the best price on your cover, because I'm not really an expert in those things. The only thing that I can say about finding a good cover is that you need to know the expectations of your genre. For example, well-photoshopped covers from stock photography is acceptable for a wide range of genres, but I really do feel that illustration is a must for fantasy and probably advisable for science fiction. Just because it's hard to find stock photography of goblins or dragons, or even just a mystic warrior with a particular pendant on their chest, like I have on one of my covers. When it comes to getting the best price, again, I do not have vast experience, but you should be willing to pay well for good work. I would say that paying well for a cover is like vital, right next to paying for good editing. There are good websites out there where you can find pre-made covers or find decent artists to do newly designed covers. However, I do have one tip for lowering the price somewhat on your cover art. I offer my artists a 50-50 split on merchandising for the covers they do for me. In other words, on any product where their art is the primary appeal of the product, they get 50% of the profits from that sale. So my artists don't make anything off of my book sales where people are primarily buying my novel, but anytime I sell an Underrealm poster, for example, like one of those Nightblade posters in the background right there, my artist gets 50% of the profit of that sale. I found this makes artists much more willing to negotiate prices, and they will usually turn your art around much faster. And also, although this point I realize will be different to you depending on what your philosophy is, but I kind of think that it's a better business practice, you know? It just sort of like helps uplift the entire independent art community, which is a second reason that I do that. But if you don't care about that, I mean, I guess that's fine. Okay, so now we come to the process of actually getting the cover designed. What I ran into when I first had somebody else design my covers was that it was very difficult to get them to completely understand my concept. Now, sometimes that was because I myself didn't have the exact concept in my head, so that's the first thing you've got to sort out. You should know what you want, and if you don't, you should expect to pay your artist more and more and more every time you ask them to revise a sketch or try a new concept for the cover or whatever. The best way to keep your costs down is to go in with a very exact picture of what you're looking for. Study other covers in your genre, particularly best-selling ones, or look at art that just generally inspires you, but do whatever you need to do to get your idea solidified. Now, once I've got that, I sit down and I try to do a Photoshop mock-up of the cover that I've got in my head. This can be a painstaking and often hideous process, but I promise you it's worth it. Search the internet for visual references of the elements of your cover. If your cover has characters on it, find examples on the internet of the hairstyle you want them to have, and the clothing, and all that sort of thing. Then hodgepodge it all together in Photoshop. You are not trying to get something that looks beautiful, or even good here. You are trying to get a general arrangement of the elements you want. For example, I usually start with the pose. The characters on my covers are usually in some dynamic pose or another to communicate excitement and adventure, and so I will search the internet until I find somebody or some drawing in the pose that I am imagining. But usually that pose is on a character who looks nothing like the character that I want. So I will take the elements of that pose and then take the elements of my character and just kind of stick them right on there. I take the face, I take the clothing, weapons, and all that, and I just sort of cut them out and then stick them right on the Photoshop thing. It does not look good. You can do this with the background as well. Separate your character and all of the elements from the background and then replace that with a background that looks approximately like what you want. And by the way, I know that some of you are really truly helpless in Photoshop and don't even want to learn the basic elements of it. They aren't that hard, and I would suggest that you at least try it, but if you really don't want to, you have another option, which is to print out the images that you find online and cut them out with scissors and paste them together that way. So what do you end up with after all this? Well, probably a Frankenstein's monster of a mess, but it does provide you with a central reference to give your artist so that they can sort of get the idea behind the whole cover. And also, doing this will sometimes make you realize that your idea is just not going to look good or work well at all. I've had at least 2 covers that I can think of off the top of my head where I tried to put together the concept in Photoshop and just spent hours on it and couldn't figure it out, and I eventually went, oh my god, even if I did achieve what I was going for, that would look terrible. So I went with another idea which was much simpler and just ended up looking much better. Now, once you've done this Photoshop mockup, if you want to get an even better approximation of the idea in your head, you can hire a sketch artist like I hired Felix to do a sketch of your cover concept. A sketch is faster and cheaper than a full cover. You can make corrections much more easily than you would be able to a full cover, and it provides you, at the end, with an even better reference to give your cover artist. So now that I've told you about this whole process, here, much to my own embarrassment, we're going to go through some examples of my own covers and the Photoshop mockup and what it eventually led to. Most of you have seen the cover of my big Underrealm novel Quest that's going to come out next year. Well, before that excellent cover was drawn, I did a Photoshop mockup of the elements of it, and here it is. Now, at the time, I had not stumbled upon the concept of using an intermediary sketch artist, so this is exactly what I sent to my cover artist along with, you know, like, descriptions of the individual composition elements that I wanted. And they sent back this piece first, and I gave them notes, and then they took those notes into consideration and adjusted the picture, and it went from picture to picture until I ended up with this as the final cover, which I am just incredibly happy with and can't wait to release to everybody. All right, let's press swiftly onward. This is the original composition that I provided my artist for the Nightblade Epic Volume 1. That is a single book edition of the first 3 novels of the Nightblade Epic. If you haven't seen this before, don't worry, I haven't released it to anybody. Again, I did not get a sketch done before I sent this to my artist, so I sent it and then they gave me back this and I gave them my notes. I will often do my notes this way, drawing them right on the cover so that the artist can get them better. And then I got this back, and through a few more iterations I ended up with this cover, which looks great. Now, the first cover that I got a sketch done for was the Nightblade Epic Volume 2. This cover was extremely difficult. It was just hard to even conceptualize and put together, and what I ended up with was this. And as you can tell, that just looks a whole lot rougher than even the previous not great looking covers that I did. So that's when I hired a sketch artist. They did a sketch, and the sketch looked like this, which is way closer to the concept that I had in my head for what the cover should look like. I sent that to my cover artist, and they sent me back this, and then we went through a few iterations just as per normal, and I ended up with this, which is still, to this day, my favorite Underrealm cover. I hate to pick a favorite child, but there it is. 2 more covers really quick, just because I know that viewers will be disappointed if they don't see this one. This is the original Photoshop mock-up that I did for the book Mystic. And that's probably the worst one. Yes, this one was famous when I put it together on stream. It is still referred to as the hair monster in my Discord server, but it resulted in this final cover for Mystic, which just looks fantastic, so I can't complain about it too much. And then finally, this is the original Photoshop composition that I did for the book Darkfire, and then I hired Felix to do this sketch of it, which looks, you know, like a lot closer to what I actually wanted, and then I sent it to the artist. Now, they are still in the black and white stage of the drawing, but this is where they're at right now, and I think that that just looks pretty fantastic. So there you go. That's how I get my covers done. Your process will obviously be a little bit different, particularly if you do a genre other than fantasy, but I hope that seeing the process has been helpful to you regardless. As always, and especially if you're new here, please let me know what you want me to talk about in terms of writing and publishing. This series is to help you with anything that you might be struggling with. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your incredible support. Thank you to Felix for the question, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye!